Hi. On the eve of Trump swearing in, at the request of one of my students, I decided to make this video on the U.S. presidential election process. Well, some aspects of the U.S. presidential election process can be very confusing to you guys. In fact, they are confusing to many Americans as well, let alone to foreigners who are used to different systems of government. First, let's see who is eligible to be the President of the United States. Well, if you're a U.S. citizen who were born within the United States, Guam, Puerto Rico, or the U.S. Virgin Islands, or born to American parents abroad anywhere in the world, and if you've been a U.S. resident for at least 14 years, and if you're over age 35, legally you're eligible to be the President of the United States. And also in practical terms, you have to have a lot of money, or at least you have to be able to raise a lot of money. For example, the Trump-Pence ticket raised $932.3 million US dollars, while the Clinton-Kaine raised $1.4 billion and still lost. And now, I'm sure you guys have heard the word primary or primaries on television time and again. That's an election to elect a candidate from each party for the presidential election in November. Actually, there are not only primaries but also caucuses, and they are quite different. But we usually call them primaries regardless of the difference. Every 4 years, each state of the United States hold primaries or caucuses from January through September, where voters choose their favorite candidates by picking delegates. So what's the difference between primaries and caucuses? Well, in a primary, you directly vote to elect a candidate like in a general election. But in a caucus, which is a state conference, you meet people, you hear what they have to say, you debate, and then you vote for the candidate you want to be the nominee from your party for the presidential election. I have to mention here that there are basically 4 kinds of primaries and 2 kinds of caucuses. They are called closed primaries, open primaries, semi-closed primaries, semi-open primaries, closed caucuses, and open caucuses. What is a closed primary? Well, a closed primary is where voters registered with a particular party select a candidate from a list for that party. That means only registered Democrats can vote in a Democratic primary, and only registered Republicans can vote in a Republican primary. For example, Delaware, Florida, Kentucky, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania hold closed primaries. So, what is an open primary? Well, an open primary is where a person can vote in any party's primary, regardless of what party he or she registered at. For example, Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, Wisconsin hold open primaries. What is a semi-closed primary? In a semi-closed primary, participation is open to registered party members and also unaffiliated voters. State election rules determine whether unaffiliated voters may make their choice of party primary in the privacy of voting booth or in public by registering with the party on election day. For example, California, West Virginia, Rhode Island, North Carolina, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, Massachusetts hold semi-closed primaries. What is a semi-open primary? Well, in a semi-open primary, any registered voter can participate in any primary, but when they identify themselves to the election officials, they must ask for a party's specific ballot. For example, South Dakota, Ohio hold semi-open primaries. Now, open and closed caucuses. Some states hold open or closed caucuses, which are state conferences for party members, like I said before. They gather, hear speeches, and vote for delegates to represent candidates at the National Convention. A closed caucus is where registered party members with a particular party select a candidate from a list for that party in a conference. That means only registered Democrats can participate in a Democratic caucus, and only registered Republicans can participate in a Republican caucus. In an open caucus, anyone who is eligible to vote in that open caucus state can participate in their caucus regardless of their party affiliations. For example, Iowa, Nevada, Minnesota, Colorado, Hawaii, Maine, Idaho, Kansas, Wyoming, Alaska, Washington, North Dakota, Guam, American Samoa, Virgin Islands are caucus states. Now, what are national conventions? Well, they are noisy, colorful, extravagant rallies where delegates and candidates bash the opposition. And this is also where the delegates formally elect and introduce their nominee, reflecting the result of the primaries and caucuses. So you can see all the delegates of the party are there for that. In these conventions, usually held in July, delegates vote for their pledged candidates. But unpledged, or so-called superdelegates, such as governors and congressional representatives, vote as they wish. Democratic Party has 4,051 delegates, and 712 of them are superdelegates. And here I have to mention a very important difference between the democratic process and the Republican process. The Republican Party doesn't use those so-called superdelegates, who have the power to choose a candidate regardless of who people want. And this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump always said in his campaign, Democratic primary process was rigged. Theoretically, Republicans do have kind of super delegates as well. But they are not usually called super delegates because they are obliged to vote for their state's popular vote winner under the rules of the party. The Republican Party has 2,472 delegates, and 168 of them are unpledged delegates, or superdelegates. The Moment of Truth. Then in November, the candidates face voters in a nationwide election. Each state is treated as a constituency. So in practice, presidential hopefuls need to win the election state by state. As Hillary Clinton found, winning the popular vote across the country does not guarantee success. After the votes have been counted and the states have been won by one candidate or the other, the matter falls into the hands of the Electoral College. And what is this Electoral College? Well, each state appoints electors who gather to vote for a president in accordance with the wishes of their respective state's voters. The number of electors each state sends matches the number of senators plus the number of House representatives each state has. But bear in mind, those electors are not the senators and the House representatives of the U.S. Congress. The District of Columbia is treated like a state and has 3 electors. And that adds up to 538 Electoral College votes. That's why there is a difference between the number of the electors and the number of the congressmen, which is 535. So a candidate must receive at least 270 electoral votes to become the president of the USA. In all the states except Maine and Nebraska, the party that wins the most votes provides that state's electors a winner-take-all scenario. Theoretically, an elector can vote for whomever he or she wants, but electors who ignore their state's wishes are rare. Then there is a swearing-in ceremony, which takes place on January 20th. In that ceremony, the president-elect takes the oath of office and becomes the President of the United States. I hope you guys understood what I said. Bye-bye.